we're talking to Jessica Webster, an exciting South African artist that you might not have heard about before. Jessica works in a very abstract, expressive way using gesture and colors and symbols, as you can see. Good morning, Jessica.
Morning. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. And you?
Thank you.
Would you like to tell us a little bit about your background, how you came to be an artist?
Sure. Well, I've been an artist now for almost 20 years. When I left high school, I went and did an undergrad at Michaelis School of Art at UCT, and that's in Cape Town. And I studied art there for 4 years. And then when I came out, I've ended up doing my master's and my PhD in painting and philosophy. So where this like very serious focus of mine on art and academia has come from, I don't know, because I was actually quite a naughty child in high school and just had a lot of fun. But I did find that through art and through going to university, I found things that really had a lot of meaning to me. And I've worked really hard for the last 20 years in my practice to develop various ideas and to think about life in various ways and to project that and to create that on the surface of my paintings.
Thank you. In today's contemporary art world, we are not limited to traditional artworks and paintings that give us a representational, naturalistic view of the world. And your work does tend to sit in a liminal space between that which is representational and also which is conceptual and expressive. Could you tell us why you chose to work like that and what this liminality achieves in your art?
Yes. Well, thanks. I'm so glad that you've pointed that out. Actually, a lot of people feel confused. They say, is your work abstract or is it representational? And I never know what to say to them. And I think on one level, a very simple level, is that I enjoy both. So I enjoy including both into my work. Another is that I really enjoy it when looking is made complex. So when you see my painting and you see one thing and then you spend an extra second and you start seeing other things, to me, that really makes painting what it should be, which is kind of an experience, even an adventure of the eyes and of the mind. Your mind and your eyes start to really start acting together when it's not completely clear what you're doing. Obviously, though, I mean, the trick of it is, and what keeps me very interested in painting is that your work, you never really know where it's going to end up when you're not sure if it's abstract or representational. So what happens is the painting process becomes really important. And that means that every day I'm really engaged in what I'm doing and I'm really thinking and wondering about what's happening with my paintings.
Which artists would you say influenced you the most? And how did that influence make itself visible in your artwork?
Well, in this painting particularly, it's quite evident, but Penny Siopis has been an incredible influence on me. And in fact, I was very lucky when I went to go do my master's. She was one of the lecturers there, and she took me on, and she was my supervisor. And I've developed a relationship with her. And I'd always learned about her in high school. So it was really interesting to then study under her and under her direction. So I'm very influenced by how she sees painting, which is all about what happens with painting when the materiality and is it abstract, is it representational? How is form? What does it say to me when things are painted in various ways? So that is very influenced by her. Other than that, I mean, I've got such a wide berth of what I love in painting. And I think, you know, with things like social media today, and this work is a lot about things like social media and virtual reality. I think the lines between painting and art and photography are becoming increasingly blurred. So I would say I'm influenced by such a wide range of things at the moment.
Could you maybe indicate on this painting in particular, particular areas that show and reference what you've just spoken about?
Yes. So actually, this painting and the body of work that this show was about was actually first kind of stimulated. The ideas were triggered for me by I was playing a lot of Candy Crush. And I got a bit obsessed with it. And I was like, why am I so obsessed with this game? And I thought it evokes like this need in me, like I want to eat that stuff. I want to have it. I want to possess it. So this whole body of work is, the backdrop is Candy Crush. And actually, when you look at this painting, you'll see in the background funny little houses and funny little signs. And those are actually taken from landscapes online from Candy Crush. And then Nishan was pointing out to me earlier that there's actually the Leaning Tower of Pisa there. Now, actually, that's part of the fairy tale of Candy Crush for me. On one hand, it's an artistic reference and it's a historical reference, but it's also actually there to like just be this weird building, like it's part of this fantasy world.
Okay. Do you, you've referred to fantasy, and we've also spoken about the way that your painting straddles to reality. Would you say that theories of the mind also play into it, like things like dealing with the conscious mind versus the unconscious mind?
Yes, yeah. So that's very much a part of my work as well, is that, and the way of looking. And I believe what we see and what we perceive are always subject to funny stuff. And it can be about our own historical experience or our own memories will affect what you see today. So this work especially really plays with that, in that I've got figures, like I've got a figure of a naked woman right in the middle of the canvas. I've got an ice cream, and then she's lying on kind of a big ice cream that's blue with lots of sparkles and lots of different colors. And it's like an ice cream that's almost melting black, beautiful black liquid down. And she's surrounded by vines. It's almost as if you're looking at a scene that's completely mental. It's not, and not mental, maybe mental in the mad way, but it's also a way about your unconscious, about your dream life. It's not something you'll come across in everyday worlds.
Okay. And then gesture, your painting's also very gestural. Does gesture play a role in creating your artwork? And is it important
Yeah.
for the viewer to assimilate with those gestures?
Yes. So I think, the gesture there is about movement, and it is about how you move, and it's also about how you act. So I think, it follows the lines of your body. And I do enjoy, making painting look like it's come from the human body, that it's not just machine made. And to me, that's what distinguishes painting from other mediums. So I do involve, and what people, my audience have come to know me by, is that my gesture is quite erratic. It's got a lot of body and a lot of movement, but it's got a lot of labor in it and a lot of scratching. Now, there's a reason that I think really mirrors my bodily experience in that I'm in a wheelchair now, and lifting these huge paintings. This painting is like really, really big. Lifting paintings, moving them around, and painting with really heavy wax and with heavy paints and things like that are actually quite difficult for me. So you do actually feel that when you look at the painting as well.
Your or the condition that has placed you in a wheelchair. Do you mind speaking about that a little bit and how it speaks into your art, how it becomes part of your story?
For sure. So in 2006, just after I'd graduated from Michaelis with my undergrad degree, I was shot in an armed robbery. And, uh, obviously survived it, but unfortunately the bullet pierced my spine. And I've been permanently paralyzed from that. I can walk with crutches now and then, and I use mainly a wheelchair. So I'd already done my undergrad, so I was really serious about painting. And obviously now this intense, hectic experience had like really given me food for thought. Like, how do I include my experience in my outlook and on my perspective on my work? And so I've discussed and I've painted a lot in the last, 15 years, a lot to do with the subject of trauma and with sadness, and how do we deal with our emotions. And again, I don't know if about the art hasn't been so much about the art itself, isn't about healing, but it's a picture of various ways in which I've perceived my life. So now the painting that is the example today. There's a bit that does seem somewhat traumatic because things have been kind of scratched off. There's a kind of chaos there. And as I said, in the movement itself, there's a difficulty. But what I've really included is like this experience of Candy Crush, of sitting around just playing Candy Crush, and that being the backdrop for all my thoughts. So at all points, I kind of my physical and psychological experience of life becomes very much a way in which I paint as well. My painting and my life are kind of inextricable, really.
And one of the challenges for artists in South Africa is for us to define ourselves now in a post-apartheid way, so that when people look at us, they see us as artists, and there is something that ties our art to our national identity that is now emerging as a new form. Would you say because of the trauma that maybe your art somehow refers somehow to maybe the past violence? Because I mean, South Africa is known as a very violent country. It is something that we live with. But at the same time, if I look at things like color also, there's almost also a need for reconciliation and, like you say, healing. Is that something that is in your art?
Yes. I'm not sure if I'm always very positive about things, because I feel quite critical. I feel quite critical of white people in South Africa. And even though I've suffered, violence, it's maybe given me a way of having more empathy. So I think, with white people still holding the economic power in South Africa, I do like to focus on especially the way white people tend to view various issues in South Africa. And this thing about Candy Crush, about wanting to possess stuff, I've looked at it as a way of possessing land. So in the painting's got, it's been painted on Hessian, which is like very rough sacking. And that sacking represents of labor and hard work. And then over it, I've painted these bright colors and things to do with Candy Crush. And it's about this relationship between having this very abundant, easy life and a life of excess, and then how it's interacting quite violently with the reality of things such as land and people who are having to work the land. So in that way, I'm looking at relationships in a critical way, not necessarily. I think there's a lot of room for thinking about healing and for thinking about where we do connect and because I think people are actually more the same than they are different. But I like my painting to bring out things that I'm actually self-critical about, things like I feel ownership over various things. And I like to complicate that understanding for myself and for the viewers.
Wow. What I really enjoy now about this conversation is that maybe that wasn't that explicit, but now that you've explained it, and particularly about the Hessian and that idea of Candy Crush kind of also being like this mindless pursuit of ownership. It's just kind of like you get to this, you don't even think anymore, you're just doing that. And I think sometimes people do get caught up in that. And when you look at it now, for instance, the Leaning Tower, you also go back to the idea of the Tower of Babylon, that kind of collapse that does evoke symbolism. That's awesome. Gender roles, you've got the figure in the middle, you yourself are a woman. Is there any gender role issues explicit in your art, or is that more of a sort of an autobiographical issue, or are the two?
No, very much so. I found, all my work is actually, even though I deal a lot with trauma and I use various themes like Candy Crush and like movies and film stills, all the different shows I've had. But I always focus on the woman's body because I think it really lies at the center of all of these debates. And we are finding that now as the media finally and the government finally are paying more attention to gender-based violence, which, I mean, I'm a victim of that. I was, really attacked on the level of being a woman and of being weak. And I feel like if we can resolve that issue, I think we'll find a lot of other things following suit. So it concerns me the way we objectify women's bodies and also how we try to own them and how we, the notion of violence. I think, if you look at any crime thriller, 99 out of 100 times, who gets killed? It's a woman, and it's usually a young woman. And so the woman's body and violence are very, very, very interlinked. So that always is a theme running through my work, and various feelings attached to it. So my work, it's about how I feel and what I think, but it's also about what I might evoke in the viewer. And as I said, I don't like things to be too easy to look at. These things will occur to the viewer when you're really in front of my paintings. You start to understand that and you start to get various feelings associated with that. So what I hope is that we hear so much about gender-based violence that I think we become very numb to it. But it might, by looking at my work and taking it in a very slow way, new feelings and new experiences associated with what it's like to be a woman occur to the viewer. And in that way, it's consciousness raising.
The woman in this painting, would you say she is dispossessed or is she repossessing? There seems to be, she's a nude, but she's not a classical nude. She's in a pose which what we associate with your traditional passive poses, but at the same time, she seems to be, because she's at a diagonal, there's like a sense of movement, which also implies an active position. Where would you say she's one or the other, or she could be all?
I think definitely both. There is that argument about women's liberation so I took this image from a pornographic image, which is so ubiquitous, so is she empowered or is she an object? And it's never quite clear. But what I have done in terms of the logic of this work is I've placed her, she's almost smack bang in the middle. And that's a kind of a target view. It's like, so she's actually placed in an area that can be seen as a target. And then, she's faceless and armless and, as you said, lying in a bit of a passive position. So what I've tried to do is her position is almost arbitrary. We become surrounded by pornographic images and images of women being sexually available. And they're almost random. It's not as if it has it has any meaning. And that's actually quite hectic. And that she's just a sign in the bigger scape, like this painting it's a landscape and it's a story. It's a number of things are going on at the same time. And she's a sign of that ever-present woman's body that really doesn't mean anything. Meanwhile, actually our bodies do mean a lot and they don't mean that,
Well, like you say, she's right in the middle, but you don't actually see her initially when you look at the painting.
Yeah, exactly.
And everything kind of blends in with the general gestures and everything. It takes a while before she comes into focus. So that's an interesting way of placing her. If the kids are listening to this and you're looking at the themes, you'll see that we've actually really intensely covered a lot of themes. So hopefully a lot of the kids who are watching this will see that this is a great example to use for any essay within that section, whether you GDE or IE school. There's a lot to use. Is there anything else that you would like to add that you feel is specifically relevant and important to know about your art and this art in particular?
Well, this painting in particular, I was discussing penicillin. So what I was going to get to is the meaning of this painting. It draws a lot from Penny's earlier work, that painting Melancholia, where she took very thick wax and painted cakes and a whole table filled with food and a funny nude sculpture and very bright colors. And she was using it to talk about the excess of apartheid era, the excess of the whites. So in this painting, you cannot see it, but I work with wax, and the wax is about this thick in some areas. It's like really coming out of the canvas. And obviously there's this ice creams, and there's like the wax, you feel like you can eat a lot of this stuff. And then there is that funny nude. So there's a direct reference there to Melancholia. But I think that's in terms of facts, that's the one fact. I think anything else is that I really think that a lot of interpretation, I can tell you what I think, but I really like to leave my paintings open to everybody else's interpretation. And what you see when you see my work is what's there, in my opinion, and it matters. It's because it's your subjectivity, it's your perception. So I like to think that my work is ambiguous and maybe it's sometimes complex, but it's only because I'm letting you decide what you think.
Thank you so much. And I know that there's definitely going to be a new appreciation. And I hope that kids realize as well that difficult work is often very rewarding. It's very challenging. But like you say, there's just so much more to it then. You know, a bowl of apples will always just be a bowl of apples. But painting like this can live with the person for years and years and years. And as we grow and we experience, the painting just can renew itself in our relationship with it. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.